Okay, welcome to another episode of the Sistah Girls Book Club podcast. I'm your host, Sharee, and today we have a special guest. You're a celebrity ghostwriter. You're also the CEO of your own publishing company, 13th and Joan, a media personality, and a theatrical producer, which means she writes and produces her own plays. Miss Ardre Orie, how are you doing today?
Hello, hello. I'm doing amazing. Happy to be here and thank you for having me.
I'm so happy to have you with us today because first of all, I think everybody in their mama always wants to know exactly how does someone become a celebrity ghostwriter. But before we even get started there, on a scale of 1 to your most favorite musical artist, how are you feeling today?
Oh my gosh. I mean, I'm feeling amazing. My favorite musical artist, if I was rating it, would be on tour, on a world tour. I'm feeling amazing.
Okay, that's great. I love that. All right, so let's jump right into it and get back to the beginning. Okay, you're a young girl and you're writing. Who was the first person to tell you that you had something in your pen?
Oh wow. So I was, it started with being a young girl who talked based on what the teacher said too much in class, right? And many of us have that, especially those of us who love to read and those of us who love to write. We all had that label of talking too much. We now know too, some of that might have been rooted in them not fully understanding us, but that's another topic for another day. So I remember I was 9, and a teacher came to my class. She was not my main teacher. She was a teacher who taught other students. So she came to my class and she asked me to come out and come to her. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm in trouble again for talking too much. And so we walked this corridor. We went to her classroom, and it was just something I had never seen before. It was colorful. There were shapes. There were lots of different things. And she said, I realize part of the reason you may be so talkative is that you're finishing a little earlier than some of your classmates. So I want to take this time to have you create something. So I was like, okay, well, what am I supposed to create? And she said, well, I want you to decide what you're going to create. So she said, you can write, you can draw, you can sing, you can do whatever. And I said, okay, well, writing, that's close to talking. So I'll write. So then what are you going to write about? And I was like, okay, how do I make a decision about what to write about? But anyways, that one meeting turned into several meetings where she would pull me out 30 to 45 minutes a couple of times a week. It turned into me developing a book about Black women in my community. I felt like I didn't see immediately lawyers, doctors, scientists, women who were doing amazing things as role models. I knew that they existed, but I just didn't see them. And I felt if I didn't see them, then maybe there are other young ladies like me who didn't see them. So that project turned into my first book. Wrote and published my first book at the age of 10. And then she said, okay, so now that the book is done, what are you going to do? And I didn't realize at the time that I had to interview them. At that time, there was no internet. So I had to find them in the phone book, call them, ask them questions, and then go back and write. And so once I finished, she said, what are you going to do with this book? And I was like, oh, I'm going to publish it. So I didn't even know, what that really was at the time or how to get to that. But I set up a book signing. I invited the press and media, and it was just an amazing day. So that night, my mom came home and she had two hands filled with money. And she said, here you go. And I was like, okay, well, what is this? And she said, this is your money. And I said, from doing work, like from work at school? And she was like, yes. And so we continued to literally sell those books out of our trunk. We would have, various orders printed, and I became the girl that wrote the book. And so it was then that I knew, wow, words and stories, there's something powerful here. So it was at the age of 10.
Well, I know at 10 years old, I probably was somewhere watching like cartoons, 106. Like I was being very unproductive, well, productive and no, I was not writing.
Productive.
I was actually writing, but I wasn't writing, I wasn't published yet. But I think that is amazing. I think it's always interesting to hear who pours into someone first to like catapult that idea that you can do, make something happen. So I'm just like, teachers are important. That's number one. And number
Oh,
two,
yes.
you had like the wherewithal to keep it going because you were like, I want to do a book signing. I want to keep the next step and the next step after that.
Yes.
So I always say a person's childhood, be it good or be it bad, can shape or sharpen their
Yes,
talents, even when it's not a positive environment at times. So, for
absolutely.
instance, a child who lives in the hood, their awareness versus a child who lives in the suburbs. So you're going to have two different um, experiences. So, how
Yes.
did your childhood environment shape and sharpen you to become the storyteller that you are today?
So, I had that amazing experience. And I grew up in a single parent home. And so that was kind of one of the things, we all have these things that make us either feel that we are or are not enough. And so not having two parents in the home was one of the things that kind of made me feel like, gosh, I must be, lacking or missing something. That was one. So being able to have that experience and write helped me to kind of find the what made me special, and so that was great. Shortly thereafter, my mother found a relationship, and she thought that she had discovered love. I knew immediately that this was not a great person for her, but she had poured so much into me. I kind of felt like saying something or standing in the way of what she thought to be happiness would not be a good choice, wouldn't be ideal. And so I didn't say anything, and that turned into a very tumultuous relationship. It turned into, lots of sleepless nights, me staying awake to make sure she was safe. Me even not seeing a future for myself because I thought, that I might have to come between him harming her. She was literally all that I had. So that became the pages being a safe space, because during that time, house business was legit house business. We were not in an era like we are now where transparency and sharing, and there's lots of trauma bonding actually that happens when we share things that have happened to us. That was not the case back then. It was highly embarrassing, to have someone be a victim of domestic violence, and the laws were very much not in favor of the victim. And so the pages were, that was really the only place that I had to go with that information. And so the childhood then shaped, because it needed to be, I needed somewhere to channel everything that was happening. So childhood helped in that way, even though it was a traumatic experience.
Wow, that's a story because I think the story is so interesting because it goes from like this 10-year-old almost prodigy, like you know what I mean, like a business woman,
Yeah.
business girl at a certain age, and then it's like we have all these. I'm sure you were the talk of the town, talk of your school, and then you're going into a situation years later that is like the exact opposite of that. So
Hmm.
um how did you keep the momentum going? Because when you go to school, right, you get probably all this love, and even if you have your own school little woes with your friends, you ain't talking to who new boyfriend is doing what. It's still like a relatively safe space, right?
Hmm.
And your home is supposed to be your peace. So how did you keep the momentum going when you knew that things were going on at home that just wasn't right? How do you say I'm gonna keep my creative brain? I mean, kids are
Right.
resilient. That's still like really big to have them go.
Yeah. Yeah, I at the time, I think that we all just go into survival mode. There's no real rhyme or reason for why we do things. It's just a matter of survival. So like one of the things that happened, I remember I had this extra phone line. And so you remember, back in the day using three-way was a thing. But I had two phone lines. And so it was like I had my own phone number. So the public face was like, oh, she's got her own phone number. Well, the other phone line was actually to call for help so that he wouldn't know that, that somebody was calling the police. There were really times of, I think, wearing two faces, if you will. There was a public face, and then there was a face as far as what was happening in the home. And not only did my mother do that, but I did that as well. We became masters at that. There were times where he would take our car. We had one car. He did not come to the relationship with a car, but he would take our car, and we didn't have a way to get food. So we would be walking to, the nearest convenience store to get canned goods to be able to, just have food. And I remember one time he drove past us in our own car. We were going to get some food because we didn't have a way to do it. So it really became putting on a happy face when there were other things going on. But I think that that also became a useful skill as a ghostwriter, because now, I am really intaking other people's stories, whether that be good, whether that be traumatic experiences. And that's one side. And I'm able to really own that in order to pour it back onto the pages. But I'm also able to, maintain what I would refer to as a real balance in my real life and not allow those things to become my own. So I think that, God truly prepares us in ways that we can never even imagine or conceive of. But it was really a matter of just wearing two different faces, public and private.
Wow. Yeah, that's a lot. And you still persevered. So I'm gonna speed up a little bit because you end up an assistant principal, your mom, you're living your life, you're married, you have a whole full life, I'm
Yeah.
sure. So how do you get to a point where you're like, this has been really enriching. I love it, love the kids, but I'm about to go and build my writing empire. Like, how do we get there?
So, I can't take any credit for it. I want to say God just pushed me off a ledge. When I was pregnant with my second daughter, I was like a sick pregnant woman. Like, I had a seizure. It was just all the things. And so I needed to step away from my job to be able to bring my daughter here safely. That was one thing that happened. The other thing that happened was that we moved. My husband got a job that relocated us from Florida to Georgia, to Atlanta. And so when I got to Atlanta, I was really dealing with having resigned from a position that I had worked for a long time to get degrees in. I was paying Sally Mae for these degrees. And, I always associated my worth with an ability to generate an income. But when I stepped away from this job, then I didn't have that. And I was trying to figure it out. So, anyways, long story short, I tried all kinds of brands, businesses. I launched everything you can think of besides a circus. Okay. I was doing everything to try to use my skill set and work around my husband's schedule. But one of the things that I found I had launched a nonprofit that was for women and teen girls. We were addressing entrepreneurship. We were addressing self-esteem, which is a huge thing for women. So I started doing makeup because I launched a cosmetics company out of all the things, launched a cosmetics company. That cosmetics company, Atlanta was kind of on the cusp of becoming the, mini Hollywood that it is today. So
Mhm.
I would go to different sets and be the makeup artist. I would volunteer to be the makeup artist if they were able to use my products. And so doing that, I would see a lot of women like, oh, don't photograph me this way. Oh, I saw lots of self-esteem issues. That was concerning to me. So I thought, okay, one way for me to market this book, one way for me to market this brand is to write a book. Assembled 21 women and teen girls. I gathered them for basically a retreat, had them to tell me their stories, similar to what happened when I was 10 years old. And then I went back and wrote each story as if I were them. I didn't memorize. I didn't write down anything that they said. I had memorized it all. So I published that book. That book was called Consciously Beautiful, I Am Enough. And it was addressing women and self-esteem. Because these women were featured in the book, they felt that the book belonged to them. They took ownership of the book. So by the time we launched the book, and we had the book signing, it was a massive success because there were 21 women and teen girls who took ownership of this. So they invited their families, their friends, all the things. And so from that, I got a phone call from someone who said, hey, I have a client who's going to be on a show, a brand new show on VH1. They need a book for their storyline. Can you write this book in 30 days? And I was like, well, I don't have a job. And so I need to pursue this opportunity. And that was the catalyst for the ghostwriting career.
Mm. That is amazing because I think oftentimes we get into these points. Like, that's my question too coming up, is like, before you started your own publishing company and you wrote right in the book, there's always so many zigzags, right? And
Yes.
so you said you had a cosmetic line, you did different things. How did you know that this just wasn't another zigzag and that this was the move to go to launch your career? How did you know that this was the thing, since you had already had different things that I'm sure was popular and moving forward, even doing makeup? That's in Atlanta. Like, you know what I
Right.
mean? That's so big. So how did you
Right.
know that this is the career and not another zigzag in your story?
Yes, and I'm actually at that same crossroads right now, and so what happened previously prepared me for where I am right now. But the bottom line is this: I always tell people, because you're on fertile ground or not. You're either on fertile ground or not. When you are on fertile ground, there is a harvest to be reaped. That is literally, you can take your basket and collect a harvest. The harvest is not always money immediately, but it will come in the form of people who can push you forward. It will come in the form of resources. It will come in the form of someone saying, take this space and host your activities for free. And so when you're not on fertile ground, those opportunities don't come. And I am saying, in each situation, fertile ground versus non-fertile ground, it is work that is required. There is work that has to be done, but fertile ground reaps a harvest. And so I learned with those other ventures that I was not on fertile ground because there was not a profit. The only thing that I was fulfilling was, I was happy. I was happy to be making a difference. I've never started a business venture or any other thing, a brand, that didn't have the notion to make a difference, to help. It was never about just money, but I was not on fertile ground. And so when I started writing, out of the woodworks, more and more opportunities came. The first opportunity was VH1. It was word of mouth that it was next MTV, WeTV, BET, Centric. And this was all word of mouth. At the time, I didn't even know that there was a term for someone who wrote books for other people. I wasn't even familiar with the term ghostwriting, but I was on fertile ground. And so that's how you know. That's how I knew.
I love that fertile ground. I'm gonna have to keep that in my mind because I think
Mhm.
a lot of times we get nervous. We're always trying to constantly ask ourselves, is this the right move? Because
Yes.
just because we're getting paid from it, or even in the proximity of maybe people that we want to be in the same room, it's always that question: is if I'm moving in the right direction,
Yes.
and if I'm not, what does that look like?
Yes.
So you write your own first book, and
Mhm.
then you started 13th and Joan.
Mhm.
So, and in the middle of that, you low key become a celebrity ghostwriter without even adding a name. So,
Yes.
what made you go into ghostwriting instead of just writing more of your own work and publishing it?
That's a great question. So technically, I started 13th and Joan only to publish my own work. I never had the intent to be a ghostwriter. After I published that book, I then turned each of those ladies into characters in my mind. And I said, okay, if this person had done this or made this decision, how would their lives be different? And so I wrote a theatrical production called Lipstick Monologues. My thought was that I was only going to be doing the theatrical productions and writing my own books. I thought I was going to be the female version of Tyler Perry, and that's how it was going to work out. Somebody would come to the play, they would want to turn the play into something else. That was the plan. So after I started building the theatrical production, and I had a great, consistent audience in Atlanta, sold out shows. I had done about 4 of these productions. My husband gets a job that relocates us to Chicago. So for 13th and Joan, one of the things that the authors who I wrote books for needed was a place to publish the books, because they were like, okay, great, now we have it done, but where do we go to publish it? So I had just happened to start 13th and Joan, and I was like, okay, well, I have a place to publish it. So it became known as kind of a one place. You don't have to go to a multitude of places to get the book published. And I was fine with publishing other people's work. So that's how 13th and Joan got moving. When I moved to Chicago, I am originally from Florida. It was cold. I had never been in cold like that. It was very difficult to do the productions from Chicago, to really be close to the cast and to build the bonds that we normally do to create theatrical productions. So I started taking more ghostwriting jobs because I was staying in the house. I was like, I'm just not going to go outside. I'll be here. I'll just write. And so that is how the ghostwriting kept moving. It was never my intention to be a full-time ghostwriter.
Now, I got to go back a little bit because you go from writing books to theater. Where did the passion for theater come from?
Well, I just felt like everything that happens to us is as a result of the decisions we do or don't make. And so I'm always thinking, if someone tells me about their story or their life, I always think in my mind, now, if they had done this, if they had gone to the left, or if they had gone to the right, or if this happened, how would they be different? Because as you said, what happens to us during our childhood manifests in who we become. So I'm always thinking about various scenarios and how that changes who we become. So I had this, 21 women and teen girls. I had these stories right here. And I thought, first and foremost, I want to put this in a format that people can see it and hear it and be close to it. And so, we tackled topics like domestic violence, we tackled topics love and relationships, spirituality. At the time, we talked about alopecia. Nobody was talking about alopecia back then. And so I wanted to see it. I wanted these stories to be personified. And that's how the lipstick monologues came about. So I knew that I loved theater. I loved that. And I really wanted to do more of it. And I did, until moving to Chicago. And I was like, okay, it's cold. So I don't know if I'll be able to build another audience here. I had done so much work, honestly felt defeated, because to build an audience that comes out to your theatrical productions and have sold out shows, like that takes a lot of work. And so I didn't really think that I could do it again in Chicago.
I was just about to ask, how did you keep up the momentum in Chicago? Because I'm like, that's a big transition to go where
Mhm.
basically everybody knows your name, you're moving and shaking, and you're like, Chicago.
Right.
You know what I
Right.
mean? Uh,
Yes.
so I'm like, how did you do it?
Yeah,
Uh,
I didn't. That's why, I started to gain my footing in Chicago, but I just leaned into the ghostwriting. And I leaned into all of the things that I could do where I didn't have to physically be present, which was writing, for people. I would fly a lot to meet with my clients. I do a lot of weekend trips. There were times where I remember, like, I would cook meals for my family, fly out on a Friday night, spend all day Saturday, come back Saturday night. I was just doing whatever I could then to grow 13th and Joan, because I could do that from wherever. My clients could be wherever, versus the theatrical productions. But I did not build a fan base in Chicago, not at all. And I actually hosted a casting because I had lots of people that said, yes, I want to be a part of this, even some celebrities. But I just didn't know if I could do it again. And I didn't at the time take the risk. I wasn't willing to take the risk. I just figured I would do something safe and build the publishing house.
got you. And that kind of makes sense because it's like certain you got to take a leap and it come with money.
It was too much. It was too much.
So you book a client. What is the process from booking a client to getting their book published? Like, what does that even look like for a celebrity?
Right. So well, first and foremost, working with celebrities and working with what I refer to as everyday heroes, the process is exactly the same, because I come from a mindset that, we all have genius. We all have gifts and talents, and some of our gifts and talents are amplified, for the public to see, and some of our gifts and talents are not, but we're all celebrities to someone. And so for me, it has always been important to make sure that I treat everyone the same, because everybody's story is of immense value and it can change someone else's life. So that's one. Two, the celebrity space is really about word of mouth. People want to work with the best. People want to work with the person that they believe can truly get the job done, that will be focused on them. And believe it or not, even though my mother and I experienced what we did, my mother was a counselor for decades. And so I grew up in a home where she taught me to listen differently. It wasn't just listening to hear, it was always about listening for understanding. It was always about listening to things that people didn't say. And so a lot of those nuances really, I can pick up on them from a person. I think it's just a heightened level of emotional intelligence. And so that helps me as a writer, because that is how I approach interviewing someone about their story. That's how I approach the process. I have clients that come back and say, I want to write another book, not because they want to write another book, but because they want to go to therapy, essentially. That's what it feels like working with me. It is a series of conversations, it is a series of pulling back layers. It is really facilitating the process of helping people to make the connections in their lives that it's hard to make when you're living the life. And so I think that is the most valuable skill set for ghostwriting. The other thing is that, when I see stories or when I hear stories, I don't think about it in terms of chronological order. I think about it, if I tell you, a story, I'm inevitably gonna flash back. It's very hard for me to just say, okay, this happened at 10 years old, because whatever happened at 10 years old, there's a connection to what is happening at 40 years old and beyond. And so the storytelling, I think, really plays a role in that people have something interesting to read. And then last but not least, nobody wants to read a boring book, so I always tell my clients, if you're not ready to be transparent, not only about the good things, but also the things that you need to work on, what are your character flaws? Because that's why we read. We read so that we can experience life through someone else, and we don't necessarily have to make all the mistakes, and we don't have to go through all the trauma or all of the the good things that may happen. So my approach to storytelling is very much like what we would want to watch versus just read. So all those things, I think, combined together create an experience. So working with me it's an experience. I become friends, not real friends, but friends in that all of my clients are always, throughout the day, they're like, oh, I wanted to tell you this. I'm the first person they think of to tell something because of that connection that happens.
I really like that, because like you said, a lot of it is listening. So, but also it's like the nonverbal things, right? If
Yeah.
they breathe a loud breath, or if they stutter, they start speaking freely, and all of a sudden they start stuttering over a story and they start stumbling, right? So a lot of that is just paying attention to how they recount a story. So how do you know when to lean in and when to pull back?
Yeah, one of the things that I explain up front to my clients is that this should hurt. Anytime we do deep emotional work, no matter what space we're in, it should hurt because we are removing layers. It should hurt, but it should also heal. And so we go through a series of hurt and heal so that we can not only become the best versions of ourselves, but also to be enlightened about the life experience that we're having. Those connections that we make, understanding why we do things the way we do is invaluable. It really sets the tone for success. It sets the tone for us to thrive when we understand ourselves. And we don't get enough time to understand ourselves because we're so inundated, we're so busy. And so this is a concerted effort to understand ourselves and then also to be understood. Very rarely in the conversations that we have with others is the other person listening to deeply understand us. It just doesn't happen because everybody's busy. And so we're exchanging so that we can talk. We want to share about ourselves. So there's great value in being in the company of someone that really wants to hear and understand who you are as a human being. It adds to the life experience. So I think it's just very, very valuable to be seen. And that's what we're all missing. We all want to be seen, we want to be heard, we want to be understood. And so because that's my job to do that, I think it just makes it a pleasurable experience for my clients.
Now you said, because you take in a lot, how how do you detach from that? Because you're taking in a lot of stories, a lot of trauma, a lot of ups and a lot of downs. You're being, uh, for better words, they're dumping their stuff on you, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Then you go home and you have to live your life, and now you're a listener. How does that roll into your regular life? You being a ghostwriter, and knowing how to listen and knowing how to catch different things. How has that helped you in your personal life? And also, how did you cultivate a space where people listen to you so that you would be okay?
Hmm. That's a great question. So one is going back to that childhood and kind of living that double life. I 100%, when my calls end, I am immediately able to turn it off. That has taken years of work and practice. I also I have like a client phone, and then I have a phone that only my family can access me on. So when a client sends a voice memo or they send a text message, with something like, "Oh, I forgot to tell you this." Well, if that phone is not in my, like when I'm with my family and we're at the movies, I might not take that phone, or I might turn that phone off. So I know how to make myself accessible at certain times. The other thing is that over the years, I have done deep work within myself to try to attract the type of energy that I want to catch, right? Like, there are some people whose energy, it's not the trauma, the energy is not energy that I want to take any type of ownership with. And so I've learned over the years how to identify energy that I don't want to align with, because you do bring that in, to your spirit. So that's been really, really helpful. And then when it comes to listening for me, one of the major ways that I am able to express myself is by creating, because back again to the childhood, the paper used to be who listened. And so I still utilize that, and I create a lot of art back to theatrical productions now. Thank goodness we relocated back to Atlanta, and just after the pandemic. And that was when I made the decision to go back to relaunch these theatrical productions. And so in the art that I create, I'm able to channel a lot there. And then lastly, my family does a great job of listening to me. My husband is a great listener. My daughters are great listeners. My son is a great listener. So I can always talk to them. But the paper has always been my go-to, and it still is.
I love that. That's like a safe space for you.
This is
Um, so when thinking about a person's story, a lot of people go through hard times, and I'm not trying to be mean. A lot of people die. A lot of people have horrible childhoods. A lot of people have horrible adult experiences.
Mhm.
But what makes someone's story stand out amongst the crowd? Like what's the it factor for a story?
The it factor for a story is not actually the series of events that happen. It is who the person becomes in it. And so it is about the person's evolution. Because if you think about it, when we read books, it is because we want to see how that person handles the things that happen to them. And so it could be, someone is going to the store. Well, there's no real story, someone's just going to the store. But if they leave the house and then they get in the car and the car doesn't start, and then when they finally get the car started, they uh, are driving and then they hit a deer, and then you realize that when they get to the store that they only had $5.30. Now we're talking, so how are you going to handle these things? And as humans, that is why storytelling is so important. We want to know how someone is going to deal with something, because we are just trying to survive. And that is why when we read stories and we take stories in and we listen to stories, what we're listening for is instructions on how to survive that situation. Now, most of us know we're not going to be, in a park and a bear approach us. That's probably not going to happen. But if somebody starts talking about a story where they were in a park and a bear approached them, you're going to stop and listen, because your mind subconsciously says, now, if that happens to me, what am I going to do? How did this person, handle that? And so it is about who the person becomes in the things, in the midst of the situations that happen to them. That is the story. That's what makes it have an it factor.
I like that because that is true. You be like, "Well, a bear, and then what
Right.
happened?"
A bear. Now, what did you do? What happened? And that's not even, I don't think I'll ever be in a situation where a bear is where I am, because I'm not going to be where bears are. But, it's just a moment of interest for us, because we're just listening for survival. That's all we all want. We want to survive this life experience.
Yeah, I love that. And so, what is your process like for getting someone like searching out the talent to add them to your publishing company? Because they could be a good writer, but not a good storyteller. So, how do you know if they have the potential to
Hmm.
be? Because now you're not just doing memoirs and you're not doing
Right.
nonfiction; you're doing fictional writing. That's a whole different ball game. So, how do you know when to say, "I see something in this person, I'm going to sign and work with them," versus saying, "You know what, I'll pass," because
Right.
that's a sink or swim moment.
Right. Well, you hit the nail on the head in that respect. So when I started publishing other people's work, one of the major things I realized is that Black people did not have access to equitable publishing, right? We are, if you look at the statistics, the data, if you look at who is getting the publishing deals, who the literary space is putting the dollars behind, we're not in the majority for that. And that was problematic to me because I knew that I had the capacity to write, but I'm like, wow, I could possibly never ever get a publishing deal, and that means that the stories I have would never see the light of day. So I started to welcome anyone who had a story that wanted to be worked with for 13th of Joan. And that's how we got to the point of publishing over 200 titles, because I was literally just seeking out people who had a story to tell, but they might not have necessarily been writers. They might not have necessarily been people who would get publishing deals. That was arduous work, very, very hard. The other thing is, and I'm just being fully transparent, when the dollars are not circulating for a particular group of people, a marginalized group of people, a group of people who society has said they are less than, when we know that not to be the case. Investing in something like publishing can also be questionable. So I also had to really kind of straddle the fence to make prices that were affordable for people that I know needed to publish. And it was really, really difficult to run a publishing house and to try to scale it when you're trying to also be affordable. It's kind of like, do one or the other. Are you going to be affordable? Are you going to be accessible to everybody? How are you going to do that? And so over the years, I've had to fund a lot myself, right? From my other, what I say, my day job, from ghostwriting and trying to really make that company be what it needs to be for the masses. Now we've gotten to a point where I'm actually, this is the first time I've even saying it publicly, but we are going to be announcing shortly that the company is going to become a private independent publishing house, where we will only be accepting submissions, really looking at the work that either I want to invest in and publish to bring to market, or we are accepting clients via referral, meaning they are from existing clients, our existing network. Because at this point, I have 100% sewn into aspiring authors. I have sewn into aspiring writers. I've done that work, and I will continue to do it through our literary initiatives that we have. Like, we have a young literary initiative for authors who are under the age of 18, to teach them how to make money from books, to publish their works, and all of those kinds of things. Also launching a nonprofit to be able to do more of that work. But as far as 13th and Joan being an open to everyone, and we really kind of cultivate the writers, we are now merging, or evolving, should I say, into a private indie publishing house, where we're really focused and really being intentional about who we offer publishing opportunities to. And the reason for that is because I am leaning heavily more into the theatrical productions, and I need time to do that. So you can either be a CEO or you can be the talent. It's hard to do both, right? So I'm going to be leaning more heavily into creating more theatrical productions and bringing that to more places, taking shows on tour, doing that kind of thing, and then also continuing to cultivate the ghostwriting that I currently do. So lots of changes, more of the same, and lots of changes at the same, all at one time.
I love that. So a lot of it, when thinking about the landscape of publishing, is always the trends. You got to be on top of what's trendy, what's going to be the forecast.
Yes.
Are there any genres that you're trying to lean towards? Because I know people want to know that part.
Sure, absolutely. So, one of the things, and you're absolutely right about the trend. So we have AI, right? I am not someone who bashes AI. I think that there are ethical uses of AI, and you really just have to be straightforward about what it is that you want to do. For the books that I write myself, I do not use AI. For the ghostwriting books, I do not use AI. However, I encourage people, especially when we are thinking self-help, when we're talking about, how-to books. AI can be a very useful tool in that space because it generates information. The question is, if you are the person writing the book, what is your area of expertise and how can that, be cultivated within the book? That's what's going to set you apart. Anybody can write a book on anything. It really boils down to the person who has the experience and how you're going to give that experience to the people and how those people will be better for it. So we are leaning heavily into memoir, of course. We're leaning heavily into women's lit. We're leaning heavily into fiction because I really want to see people cultivate our stories. And it has always been my intention to make sure that we are responsible for documenting our stories versus someone else who has not lived our experiences, who has not had the opportunity to witness our truths. And so I want us to write our own stories, and I will always be an advocate and a champion in that space. So those are the genres that we're leaning into. I want to see us write more mystery. I want to see us write more fast-paced thrillers, all of those things, and even sci-fi. But for what we're going to be writing as far as ghostwriting, we're focusing heavily on memoir and heavily on women's lit, heavily on fiction.
That definitely will help a lot of people out because I know they're like, oh, this is my chance.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
you did say like the creative and the business, right? And you were trying to like juggle both. How do you do it? Because I think that's most people's, especially if they're independent and
Hmm.
they're trying to get things rolling. They're like, I really, really like the art, but the business is kicking my butt.
Right.
How do you balance that?
Sure. That is for anyone who is creative, being a business person is definitely uh, hard because you just want to be in your creative bag. The truth of it, though, is that if you are going to be on fertile ground, you must do both. You must be thinking about both. There are one or two ways, in my opinion, to tackle it. Either you are going to acquire and learn the skills that you need to run your business, because the moment that you say I'm a creative, you are also a in business, right? Unless you're just doing it as a hobby. If you want to make money, if you want to sustain, if you want to make impact, then you have to see it as a business. There is not another way to address it. So you can either learn the skills that you need to be a business person, or you can surround yourself with the people who have the skills that you don't. I've done a little of both. There have been so many times where I've tried to get around being the business person. It does not end well because you were the person who that was given the initial vision. You cannot expect for other people to see the divine download that has been given and created just for you. It just doesn't work that way. But you can say, okay, I have a financial goal of X. Now, here is an advisor. I need you to help me get to that goal. This is what I do. This is what I have. This is what I'm bringing in. You can have, so, my thought is that you need to have someone who's watching your books at all times. You need to have someone who can tell you the trends. You need to have someone who tells you what things you're doing that are actually generating income versus not. As a creative, you may love to do a thing, but that thing may not be generating income. And so you may not love the thing that is generating income. And if you don't love it, it's possible that you generate income, but hire someone to do it so that it still gets done and it brings in the business. And then you have the space to do whatever it is that you love to do. You need to have an attorney, non-negotiable, somebody who can make sure that your contracts are intact. You need to have someone who is either over or builds a strategy for your marketing, because another thing that a lot of creatives don't like to do is the marketing. It doesn't matter if you're dynamic. If no one knows, it doesn't matter. No one knows about what you're doing, whether you've written the most dynamic book or you are the most dynamic writer. If you're not marketing it, then nobody knows about it, and who's going to buy it. So you have to have someone who's going to help amplify those messages. You've got to have what I call, raving customers or fans, the people who are going to comment, the people who are going to share. And you have to look outside of your immediate friend group and family, because we get so frustrated with friends and family who we feel don't support us, but they didn't sign up for that. And I have to remind myself of that. Like I just did a play, and there were some people that I was like, now why? didn't you come to the play? Now, you could have at least purchased a ticket, because it's shocking that people who don't know you at all go so hard for you when the people who love you and you believe like you don't. But you have to remember that those people didn't sign up for that. So you've got to have a way to bring in, cast your net and bring in more people at all times. Those are the things that I know that I'm not calling it all out, but those things are non-negotiables, even for creatives.
So those were great tips. So when you first started, you leveraged your audience when you were a writer, right? So how
Yes.
have you been leveraging, or how do you see the leverage of social media and building community? Because I think that's the biggest, I
Mhm.
guess, problem or pain point that a lot of authors have, or aspiring writers. They're like, okay, I have the story, but how do I leverage? Everybody talks about community and network, and it's just like, okay, what if I was in my house in Chicago? I just relocated like you did. How do I start building from the ground up? How do you
Right.
build that community?
Yes, and that, it is that is another non-negotiable as far as community, because of the fact that it takes a village to launch any business venture, for it to be fruitful. But community literally comes from solving a problem. For example, the last theatrical production that I did is called Ardre Orie Presents The Heart of a Man. So it was 17 men that I had interviewed, or I've interviewed several men over the years. I've spent 21 years of marriage interviewing my husband. And I was just trying to figure out, what are the things that you think women don't know? What are the things that if you could say it the way you wanted to say it, you didn't have to dance around our feelings, you could just say it. What are the things that you would say and talk about? And so I got all of my good content from that. And then I created a theatrical production where each man had a monologue speaking these truths. I cannot tell you how thrilled these men were. They were more excited to do the production than I was to write the production. They were just so thrilled about it, because it was solving a problem, which is men do not feel like they have a safe space to share their feelings, particularly Black men. The other side of that is that women feel like men aren't truthful, even though we ask for the truth. Like, are they really telling us the truth? How often do we get it? So the problem in that is that men and women, we sometimes miss one another because we're not effectively communicating. And that's not just romantic relationships. That could be mother to son. That could be sister to brother. All of the ways in which we need one another, sometimes we're missing the boat on that. And so a community was established from that, because now there is this audience of theater goers now rebuilding that community, just because they wanted to effectively communicate. So I think building community starts with a problem, solving a problem. And as a creative, we have the stories that we want to tell, right? It's not always trying to tell a story because you think the industry needs it. I literally just submitted my first novel manuscript, thank you Lord Jesus, for the first round of editing. And I was just expressing how it's not about writing to the industry, it's about writing the story you want to tell. But you have to figure out within that story, what is the problem that it is solving for someone? Is it entertainment? Is it talking about, relationships? Is it talking about sex? Whatever it is that you need to address, what problem is it solving? And when you figure that problem out, you'll find your people, you'll find your tribe.
I love that because I feel like that's always like a big thing. They're like, I got the idea, but how do I do it? How do I get to the 50,000 followers, the big, all of the people?
Right.
Um, so you did lipstick monologues a while ago, and now you just did the one with the Heart of a Man.
Mhm.
And so did you see like the parallel to like you doing starting out with the women and ended up with the men, or was that coincidental or that just happened?
No, I a long time ago, when I was an educator, one of my many businesses was etiquette. I felt like that was a lost art, people knowing how to say thank you. And so at the school that I worked at, it was considered a Title I school. My first group of students was an all boys classroom. And they were the young men that nobody else in the school wanted. The school referred to them as rejects, which would never be said as, said in public. But I believe that there was great value in these young men. So teaching them manners and etiquette and how to, sit at a table. There was just a light bulb that I saw go off in them when I brought them together as just a group of young men. They weren't trying to impress women. They were really being themselves. And I saw something that I had never seen before. And I was like, this is really special. And then I did that same experiment with young ladies. And there was just something beautiful in feeling safe with people who were the same as you, right? We all have differences, but those single gender groups. And so I took that and kind of just created it as an experiment for the theater as well. And I found so much. I mean, there is a clip we have of there. We have one monologue for the Heart of a Man that speaks about sexual abuse, and there is a cast member who the monologue is about. He has a family member who comes home from prison. His mother is very religious, and she says, we have to be a blessing to others so that we can be blessed. So we're going to let this family member come and stay with us. We're going to take them in, we're going to care for them, and we're going to put them in your room, in your bedroom. And so at night he would molest the son, and the son was just very distraught, obviously. And so with that, um, to play that role was very difficult. You have to channel a very dark place in order to do that. And shout out to Jason Louder, who is also doing his thing on BMF right now. But he really had to go there to get that character out, to show the pain. And so when he went backstage, we have a video. All of the men, literally, he is, kind of like this, down with his head down. All of the men who were in that scene have their hand on him and they're praying for him so that he can release the pain that he had to bring forward. And there, there are tears there, and it's just a beautiful moment that you don't get to see. Women, as women, we don't see that.
Yes.
That's not really, where's that? And so it's moments like that that let me know that's an example of fertile ground. When I see that these men have built community, our group text that we have for the cast, they're still talking in it. Hey, I miss you. I miss you all. We're seeing men be very vulnerable and emotional. That is an example to me of fertile ground and how I know that the mission is being accomplished. So the single gendered thing is very necessary. Now, also, I'm going to bring cast together. I'll have plays that are, featuring everybody, but these
Mhm.
single gendered have really fed the community.
I love that because I always feel like it's things that you'll say with your friends that you won't say, like if a guy's around, and the same
Exactly.
thing with guys. Um, so how do you foresee yourself managing everything? I feel like what is a day like for you? Like, because I'm tired and I'm just here for much day.
I feel so fortunate. Like, I know people say, like, I don't use an alarm clock. I don't use an alarm clock at all. I'm so excited when I wake up every morning because I know that there are some people who live a lifetime and they never know why they're here. So to wake up and be convicted, to know why you're here and what it is that you're supposed to be doing, I just don't take it for granted. So every day I'm trying to run as fast as I can to make sure that I leave this world empty, that I pour out every single thing that has been poured into me. My day looks like, waking up, I pray. I will not leave the bed. I won't do anything. I won't scroll on social media until I read my scriptures. There are times where I don't even understand what the scripture is, but I will read it just so that I have, armed myself with that. And then I send it to my husband so that he can read it. And then I get out of bed, or actually I start writing, right? I get up, throw some water on my face, brush my teeth, drink some water or tea, and I start writing immediately. I love to write when the people around me are asleep, when the world around me is quiet. I get so much done. So I'll write, like an hour on a personal project, and then I spend the rest of the day writing on my ghostwriting projects, either interviewing, I'm on the phone very often, interviewing clients. When I'm interviewing clients, I have to be in motion. So, like, I can't just sit in one place and interview because the questions don't come to me like that. So when I'm interviewing clients, I may be out walking. I could be, in the grocery store. I'm super busy while interviewing because that's how I have questions for them. So I'm always in motion, and I absolutely love it. And I go to sleep with the laptop. My husband jokes that this is the third person in the bed is the laptop, because it's always in the bed with me. Because if I think of something, I want to catch it. I don't want to lose whatever it is. But every day is different because I'm talking to different people. There are different stories, different things happening in everybody's lives. But really, when you think about it, I'm not all over the place as it might appear, because it's all storytelling. There's nothing that is not about the story. So it all kind of feels like I'm doing the same thing all day, really.
I love that. I feel like you got like a nice little sitcom just rolling in your brain and just having like the best time ever.
I
And
am
so how do
enjoying it.
you self-care? What are your self-care practices?
So Monday is my self-care day. I do not take calls on Mondays. If I write, it is only, usually only on my projects. I don't write a lot. Um, and whether that be, I don't do anything, or if I just watch TV. I love to drink tea. So, having a cup of tea, sitting quietly, I love to do that. I listen to music. I do go to get a massage or a facial. Those kinds of things are self-care for me. I will go to the gym and walk on the treadmill. I'll walk outside when the weather permits. So anything that allows me time to just think. Like, that's why I always tell my daughter, like, I don't understand when people say they're bored. Like, because I think that having time with my thoughts is so valuable, because we don't get to just think. Like, when do you hear from yourself? We're on social media, it's just loud all around us. And so to have time just to think is of great value. I love that. My favorite food is salad. I will go and have a salad. I will go to take myself on a date. I love to go by myself places. So I will go to the movies. I'll go out to eat. Just be able to have, a moment to myself. Then I'm feeling great.
And so how was the process, or is it the process for you different when creating a play versus writing a book? And what does that look like? Are you doing it at that same time, or do you take a break and say, I'm gonna do theater and then I'm gonna
Mhm.
do books?
No, I'm usually creating at the same time. So like right now, I just turned in that manuscript for my own book. Now I'm working on a TV pilot, finishing that up. So I'm always creating, and being able to create in different formats, I think flexes a muscle or a set of muscles, so that also breaks the day up, because if I'm working on a TV pilot, the muscles that I use for that are different from, working on a memoir. Even though it is all a matter of storytelling, they all have their specific formats and things. So I'm creating all things kind of simultaneously, and I like that. It's very hard for me to just do one thing only and finish that, because I would say that I get antsy and I need to do something different. So if I work for 30 minutes on a screenplay, I'll take a break, have some tea, then I'll start working on a memoir. I'll take a break, I'll listen to something or read something, then I'll start doing, another memoir. I also don't write more than 3 memoir at a time, because it takes a lot. So I don't try to overdo it in that way. I work on probably 3 at max at a time.
That's a lot of characters.
A lot of
So,
characters.
and I like it too, because I think my brain has a lot going on upstairs too.
Yes.
So I want to know, like, what is the end goal? What is the vision? Because I see books, I see plays. Now you said a pilot for TV. What
Yes.
is the empire? What is it? Is it all storytelling? Is it going to evolve past that? And like, what is the vision for yourself?
I definitely am, leaning more into um, seeing the words, the words being lifted off the pages. And so definitely want to see these books, see these stories on TV, see these stories on the screen, for sure with that. I also do writing retreats, luxury writing retreats. We do those internationally and both stateside. And that is truly a writing vacation. I started just before the pandemic. We set up our first writing retreat. It was going to be to Paris, and we had everybody signed up and ready to go. And then the pandemic happened and we couldn't travel. So I created a few stateside, safe distance writing retreats. But one of the things that I see happening is that for Black women, I really wanted to normalize luxury. And I think we're absolutely leaning into that now, but we deserve the very best of, travel and experiences. And I really feel like creating feels different when you are in a place that your day-to-day responsibilities are not a part of the equation. So we've been to Paris. We did do Paris. We've been to Belize. We've been to Cabo. We've been to, we just came back from Milan. I'll be announcing on June 1st, I'll be announcing Madrid. We have a writing retreat at Chateau Elan, which is in Atlanta. That's our stateside. And we're planning more. And so I just want for women, and it doesn't matter if you're writing a screenplay, if you're writing a theatrical production, if you're writing a book, or if you just want to go and relax and have some self-care. This is about Black women coming together and healing together. We share stories, we do excursions, we just have a good time. But there is time that is blocked off for writing. And so many women that go with us get epiphanies and revelations about their stories that they were not able to achieve when they were, back with the day to day. So there are the writing retreats. And then lastly, I have a line of luxury travel essentials. And that just kind of goes in alignment with the travel. I created those during the pandemic because I just needed another outlet. So I'm always looking for more outlets, but I truly believe that this is it as far as the empire. It is the trips, it is writing, continuing my own books, as an author, the plays, and just seeing the TV, the film, but it's all storytelling, all storytelling.
Yes, it all goes back to storytelling. So I have a couple quick questions. You have to answer them really quickly.
Okay.
Okay. So writing in the day or the night?
Early morning.
Okay. Working from home or going into an office space?
Home.
Okay. Writing a book or writing a play?
Ooh. Oh my gosh. I don't know how to choose there. Can I say both?
I guess. I already have nobody ever did. Everybody always pick living in Atlanta or living in Florida.
Atlanta.
Okay. Coffee or tea?
Tea.
Paperback or hardcover?
Hardcover.
Girlfriends or insecure?
Whew. Insecure.
Malcolm X or Martin Luther King Jr.?
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. That is so hard for me because I honor both of them. Okay, that's another both. I'm so sorry.
Who won the rap battle? Kendrick Lamar or Drake?
Kendrick.
Okay, and who is Ardre Orie?
Oh gosh. She is a vessel for the untold story.
Oh, I love that. That's a shirt. That's a bookmark.
Yes.
Information. Okay, so let people know where they can find you, and I'm gonna let you go because this was amazing. I love it.
Yes. Well, first of all, thank you. Thank you so much for what you do. It is so very necessary. And I cannot wait to send you an advance copy of my book once I get it done. I'll be so excited. And I just want to commend you on what you're doing because it is necessary. And so if you ever feel, discouraged, which I'm sure you don't, but if you ever do, please be encouraged and know that this is so needed for us and to have the community that you've established. So thank you so much for having me. You can
Thank
find
you.
me on all social media. I am Ardre Orie. That is IamArdreOrie. So that is all social media, and my website is iamardreorie.com.
Thank you so much. This was so good. I feel like everybody's gonna be informed, and I feel like you need to do like a celebrity ghostwriting something because so many people want to do it, but they don't know how or like
Yes.
get the people. So you got to do that,
Okay.
and you got to do that. And when you do it, tag us because we'll promote it. But
Okay.
this,
Absolutely, I will.
thank you so much for giving me your time, and
Thank
I just feel
you.
like this is gonna help so many people and inspire a whole bunch of authors
Good.
and writers to get to you and just get their stories out. And I feel like
Yeah.
that's always what we're trying to promote. So thank you so much.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you again for having me. Keep going and let's stay connected.
We will.
Okay.